Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. Laura, when you said, what about liquid hydration approach, I don't think I fully understand your question. I wondered if you would clarify that.
Would you like me to type it or do you want me to unmute?
No, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
Somebody told me that there was some, so the liquid IV or hydration that but as I listened to you talk more, Jill, I was thinking probably not. Like, it sounds like it's very, like I use the DHEA, which is probably not DHEA. This is not an area I don't know anything about. The cream at night that comes from like sweet potatoes or something.
Wild yam cream.
Yeah. That I buy. And actually I can feel a difference just with that when I sleep. I have a super sensitive system, but a friend who is actually a naturopath just started doing the pellets. Like, she had her blood tested and saw where the gaps were. And so she was like, you have to do this, Laura. It's amazing. Cause she had been like working on the slow progress for a long time. And so then when we were talking the other day, she mentioned something around this like IV bag, hormone replacement. I don't know enough to know.
I don't know. I've never heard of that. I have to be honest with you. I don't know anything about it.
Okay. So I clearly, again, I just absorb information from my friends, but I was just curious about it. So I'll do a little more research and figure it out. I guess it's some.
Well, and Laura, there is IV vitamin therapy that people are getting, and that's a regular thing. Maybe they're getting, some vitamin C and some methylated Bs and a bunch of amino acids, and that's definitely common.
Yeah,
I also don't know. Yeah.
Sorry. She said it was brand new. She was in this pilot program. They were doing this through this thing called liquid hydration. They were trying these hormones. Anyway.
Oh, well, you have to report back. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be just like the pellets, though. I'm going to be honest, like maybe without the sparring, because it sounds like they have these bags set up. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you, Mariah. I feel like
Go ahead.
Anyway, that was it.
Yeah.
I'm over.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up wild yam cream, because my experience is the same. And Jill, I'm curious what you think. When you look it up online and look at the research, everything says doesn't absorb through the skin, doesn't affect the hormones. When I talk to women and I look at my own experience of putting wild yam cream on my skin, it has absolutely impacted my hormones, impacted my menstrual cycle. Do you have thoughts there?
I mean, it's not going to have the same impact as, true progesterone, but I think, to your point, anything we put on our skin will absorb. I think just gauging, if we can gauge our own symptoms, that's always the best way to sort of think about whether something's working. Like you said, if there's an herb, I'm not opposed to herbs at all. I'm not opposed to using other things. I think just monitoring, and also monitoring the physiologic changes, because oftentimes I'll find women will say, I'm sleeping better. But if we look behind the scenes, sometimes, maybe they're having bone loss, or they're having issues with, like, you're looking at their labs and their numbers are really changing and their blood vessels are getting more stiff and sticky and insulin resistance is setting in. I tend to see that, nothing will replace hormones one-to-one, except for hormones. So it's not that you can't use other things. They typically won't pack the same punch, but that may not be necessary earlier on, especially in perimenopause. I mean, you just have to kind of monitor. I'm sure there are women who thrive with non-hormonal treatments. They're rare. I hardly see it. And I tend to see over time, the vagina suffers, other things suffer, where you get to a point where now it's really hard to come back. So it's like, we just want to be monitoring these physiologic changes that are happening in the body behind the scenes. Whether we're using hormones or we're using herbs or supplements or other things, to make sure that they're really having the impact that we want them to and protecting the body. That's really where I get concerned. But I agree. Topical, if something is working for you, I would never argue with the woman who says it is working for me, then it's working for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of women who've chosen to wait or not use bioidenticals up until, say, mid 60s with a great deal of success.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's relative when we're talking about treatment versus prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's comfort levels and access to cash and time and bioidenticals. It's a great conversation and a complex one. Whitney, I see that you asked about the V shot. I think of the V shot and the O shot as being PRP or ozone therapy. That's not hormones that are being utilized there. Jill, anything you would add?
I don't believe so. I know little about them, but I not that I know of it. Same thing. I think that they're not the same. Right.
Yeah. So the idea there is with injection therapy is they're taking your platelets. They draw your blood, they send it through a centrifuge. We now have your platelets. So they're injecting platelets with usually a mixture of ozone or something else. And it's stimulating regeneration of the area. So the V shot or the O shot, I've definitely had clients that have had tremendous success. I've worked with providers that do it, but that's not necessarily bringing in estrogen. Instead,
right.
It's creating vaginal rejuvenation from a different route. Same with Reverie, bringing in hyaluronic acid. From the functional medicine conference that I went to, they said for vaginal atrophy that you actually start with vaginal DHEA before even going to estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone. And
they're all vaginal DHEA can be really great. Hyaluronic acid, absolutely. You think about it's our skin, right? And that's how we really maintain that moisture. So hyaluronic acid can be very helpful. In the clinical trials or in the research that's out there, nothing will work as well as estrogen locally. That's sort of like the gold. And that is really the gold standard recommendation for women with genitourinary symptoms. But that doesn't mean HA can go a long way. Vaginal DHA can be very helpful. Sometimes they're all used in combination. So there's lots of options out there.
Yeah. Something we didn't even bring up is the WHO study.
Oh, or the WHI.
Yeah. The WHI. Sorry.
Yeah.
And the big scare around estrogen and breast cancer and cardiovascular risk and stroke. And so, there was this at one point, everyone goes on synthetic HRT, and then, whoa, nobody goes on synthetic HRT. Do you want to speak a little bit to when someone is adding in bioidentical estradiol, is there any concern at all around the ideas of cardiovascular health, stroke, breast cancer risk?
Yeah. So the WHI, for those of you that don't know, it was a huge study, the biggest study ever on hormone replacement. And it was prematurely ended in 2002 because it was falsely, I'm just going to say, I have to say falsely like 10 times. It was falsely sort of announced that women in one arm of the study, they were only using synthetic hormones. I want to add Prempro, so Premarin, which is just oral estrogen. And then they were using Prempro, which is a combination of oral estrogen and oral progestins. Nonetheless, in the Prempro arm of the study, it was announced prematurely, sort of like this cursory review of the data, that there was a statistically insignificant increased risk of heart attack, breast cancer, and stroke. That statement was retracted. The whole study committee, there was a lot of angst within the study committee. It was a couple of study committee members that sort of went forward with this. And it was statistically insignificant. It went out to the presses, the media ran with it. And basically the headline said, hormones cause breast cancer. That was really the big headline that came out of it. Heart attack and stroke as well came out of that. But I would say breast cancer really stuck around. And later on, the information was retracted. The study committee retracted the information. It never should have been said, but it stuck around all this time. And there has been a review of that data, and it has actually shown the opposite, that women who are on HRT actually have less risk of heart attack, breast cancer, and stroke than compared to women who are not on HRT. So it's really unfortunate. It never should have been said, but it has been put out there. The cardiovascular risk piece is really related to oral estrogen. Oral estrogen, just like the birth control pill, it can increase a woman's risk for clots. Oral progestins can increase a woman's risk for clots. But what we talked about today is we're using bioidentical hormones. We're not using oral estrogen. So there's no increased risk with topical estrogen. And oral micronized progesterone does not increase the risk of strokes either. So the clotting piece, it's sort of like, this is how we, kind of say, okay, this risk is gone, this risk is gone, this risk is gone, because we're using these products, which are bioidentical to what's made in the body. So it's more about the delivery system than anything when it comes to cardiovascular risk.
I'm glad that we brought that up because it feels like an important piece.
Yeah, that is an important piece. Yeah.
And then Laura said something about sleep other than progesterone. So Laura, you missed the beginning, but we talked about progesterone and the benefits of adding progesterone specifically for sleep. And you can always go back and listen to the recording of the beginning. I gave my personal experience of using it during week 4. Specifically to ensure that I get a good night's sleep, especially this week, because I have the workshop going on this week. Anything else that you want to add about supporting sleep? And I imagine hot flashes and urinary frequency is a part of that.
Big one. Yeah. So progesterone, to your point, Maraya, I mean, that's a great one, especially for more of that, like falling asleep, that kind of calming before bed. If you are a person waking up typically in the middle of the night with a racing mind, that kind of 2 to 4 a.m., we usually say, we're typically looking at probably a dip in estrogen. That's often caused by estrogen going low. Your body goes, oh, I don't want it to go low, sends out this adrenaline surge to try to get your ovaries to pump out some estrogen. And you wake up and you go, oh my gosh. And now you're up for 2 hours. Oftentimes that's related to estrogen, highs and lows, highs and lows. So oftentimes bringing in a little bit of estrogen can be very helpful if you're having middle of the night waking. Blood sugar imbalances can also cause middle of the night waking. So we circle back to insulin and blood sugar balance. Those are really sort of your heavy hitters when it comes to sleeping. Interestingly, I just recently interviewed an expert in sleep apnea, and she was saying there's a really big connection between women waking up in the middle of the night multiple times to go to the bathroom and sleep apnea, actually having sleep apnea. So true that hormones also, when they're low, again, these hormones, because they keep the integrity of the genital urinary system intact, the pelvic floor muscles are fed by testosterone. Oftentimes women are getting up multiple times a night because of this drop in hormones. So bringing in hormones and getting that integrity back oftentimes will help them so they're not having to wake up at night. But I thought it was interesting just to note that sleep apnea is a really big problem in menopausal women and perimenopausal women. And we're always thinking about it in the context of men, but women have it too. And about 90% of women who have it are undiagnosed. So something to think about as well. If, you're using hormones and you're still getting up at night, or you want to explore sleep apnea, you may not be a snorer. You don't have to be snoring to have sleep apnea. I thought that was a really great kind of nighttime tip for women as well.
And Erica, I see your question around your mom and that waking. And so like Jill said, blood sugar management, adrenals. I think of that often as the adrenal wake up. Yeah. Sounds like a drop in estrogen. For me, adding in the progesterone before bed takes it away, and I actually sleep through the night. But, keeping those blood sugars steady throughout the day. And it's fascinating. Whitney was told she had apnea because she was a menopausal woman. What about weight and body composition in the context of hormones? I think that there's value in bringing that up. And then let's kind of finish this up if anybody has any other specific questions too.
Yeah. So hormones have a lot to do with our body composition. I mean, estrogen, obviously we talked about estrogen earlier in terms of insulin sensitivity, but, muscle, think about, estrogen and testosterone specifically for muscle and bone, ligaments, everything that's really surrounding, that's keeping our bones upright and intact. When estrogen is specifically and testosterone start to drop, we definitely see this shift in body composition. It's much harder to build muscle despite what we may be doing. So we kind of try to come up with workarounds for that body composition changes. Things that we know can help are absolutely that we're having enough protein throughout our day. Really, really important, but even more important is amino acids, because proteins are broken down into amino acids, and leucine is one amino acid, and that's the most muscle building amino acid out there. So we want to make sure we're getting our leucine. Weight bearing exercises are really, really huge during this time. As much as women don't want me to say HIT, high intensity training, really, really helpful to stimulate those contractions, that the muscular contractions actually helps to usher glucose into the cells more easily as well. It helps those we can it's like a workaround for insulin resistance. So doing even like a 15-minute HIT, which is really, if you're not familiar, it's like going full out for, 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then backing down for, it can be a couple of minutes. But you're doing kind of full throttle where you couldn't go any longer, and then you back down, rather than doing these long cardio sessions, which we think we should be doing to sort of work with this body composition changes. It actually has been shown that increases cortisol, and that's going to have us hold on to weight, especially that like tummy weight. So shorter workouts, those 20-minute, 15, 20-minute HIT, strength training, walking is great. And diet becomes more and more important. So we want to bring in protein. And that's not to say you can't have some fun stuff too. But I think just making sure that we're anchoring our meals with protein and getting, some great carbohydrates, healthy carbohydrates and things like that.
And when you say protein, I think it's specifically animal protein. I mean, for those that are vegan and vegetarian, I go, this is really a time, I'm curious if you agree, this is really a time where quality animal protein is where it's at.
It's hard to get enough protein at this age and the right protein, because people are leaning on legumes a lot, and legumes have a lot of carbohydrate too. So I think it can be done. I mean, it's not a specialty of mine. I would say if you are a midlife woman and you are a vegan, you probably do want to work with a nutritionist who specializes in this and kind of help you to figure out how to get enough protein, because it's very, very difficult. I wish it wasn't, but I also see just other things tend to suffer, where women sometimes feel really good initially with a vegan diet. And then we start to see other things really change, especially when they're going through hormonal changes. So that's one that I if you can get some, even if it's eggs and you're not eating meat, but you're maybe getting some eggs and things like that, that can be very helpful.
Especially when you mentioned B vitamins earlier.
Yes.
And Erica, I know you popped on later, we're talking about this in the context of women in their 30s, 40s, 50s. This is, a wider age range than most people think. And the other thing that I think is important for us to remember is as we as women transition into that perimenopause chapter and menopause, often we put on a little bit of extra in our breasts and our abdomen. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes I smile at it because I go, right, estrogen is stored in fat and our estrogen is going down. It's like, well, hey, that's a really smart compensation for the body to go, I need to find ways to maintain my estrogen and store it in new ways. And so it's not all bad. I think we also get to congratulate our bodies for that change. And the weight-bearing exercise and the protein, I'm in total agreement, is so important.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about just those few extra pounds. And I think women, we want that 20-year-old body. We're not going to have that unless we go to really extremes. And who wants to do that? Our body is trying to protect us by giving us a few extra pounds because we make estrogen in our fat cells. So if we can embrace that a little bit, there is a point where, too much is too much. So we want to just make sure that we're really kind of keeping that, as much as possible where, at a really healthy amount of, say fat gain, because that's different than weight gain. We just want to make sure the body composition is there. And I know we didn't talk about it, but those endocrine disrupting chemicals are considered obesogens. So they're very fat promoting, which is why we always want to look at what's in our cabinets, what we're putting on our skin, just reading labels more and just trying to be mindful. We cannot be 100%, toxin free or endocrine disrupting free, chemical free, but doing our best to just sort of slowly get rid of those things that we know are just containing tons and tons of chemicals. It's not going to help our bodies in midlife when our immune systems are not as robust as they once were. We want to do things that really support our immune system and our body overall.
Yes. So if you're wanting to lose weight, take your water out of plastics, use the EWG app, clean up your cleaning products, beauty care products, all the stuff. Yeah. And yes, Erica, the adaptogen elixirs, Jill, for the women that I work with, I really, really am a lover of adaptogens. And when we make the elixir, where we've added in a protein source and a fat source, and it's a yummy drink. It's what I'm drinking here.
Oh, nice.
They're caffeine free. And generally women are using collagen powders. And now we've got blood sugar maintenance and adding in a good quality fat. So that's what Erica's referring to there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for all of your time. Anything else that feels important to say?
Just try not to get overwhelmed with it. It can be an overwhelming conversation. Let your doctor be overwhelmed with it, because your doctor won't be overwhelmed. Take that off of yourself. Just get a little bit of know-how, as we talked about. Just start diving into a little bit. Small changes. We're thinking about the long haul here. This is not an overnight thing. So anything that you can do to support your body, we want to be kind to our bodies. We want to prioritize ourselves during this time. We don't want to beat ourselves up and make ourselves feel bad. So just go slow, go at a pace that feels good for you. But like we would do with anything else, if you're a woman who's had a baby, we typically research every baby book. If we bring home a puppy, we research, how to take care of the puppy. This is a time in our life we're going to spend a third to a half of our life in somewhere along the pausal spectrum. So it lends itself to a little bit of time, like learning about it, getting to know what's going to happen in our body so that we understand it. And then we sleep better at night. We feel better because we know what to expect along the way.
Yeah. So it sounds like with Jill, you can reach out to her. She has a community, super inexpensive monthly membership. For those of you listening in the Women's Vibrancy Code, the questions that were asked, this is inside of my year-long program, which is small, it's intimate, it's application only. And we're doing the testing, and there's a whole team of master coaches and all the stuff. And so, you're welcome to reach out to me as well. And I would love to support you along your journey. For those that were here, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. And with that, until next time.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.